The sound of splintering would split the morning air as Elena Jamison watched another shingle from her roof crash into the dusty yard below, and she knew with a sinking heart that she could not afford to fix it. Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory, in the scorching summer of 1878, was not kind to widows. The sun beat down mercilessly on the small general store that had been her husband Thomas's pride and joy, the same store that now felt like a millstone around her neck. 3 months had passed since Thomas died from pneumonia, leaving her with a failing business, a crumbling building, and debts she had only recently discovered. At 24 years old, Elena had imagined a different life, one filled with children and laughter, but instead she found herself alone, struggling to keep food on her table and a roof over her head, though that roof was becoming more metaphorical by the day. She stood in the doorway of the store, wiping flour dust from her hands onto her worn apron. The building served as both her business and her home, with living quarters in the back, where she spent her lonely evenings counting what little money she had left. The store itself had seen better days. Shelves that once overflowed with goods now held sparse inventory. She had sold what she could to pay Thomas's medical bills, and suppliers were reluctant to extend credit to a woman on her own. The bell above the door chimed, and Elena straightened her posture, forcing a smile as old Mrs. Patterson shuffled inside, her cane tapping against the wooden floorboards. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. What can I help you with today?" The elderly woman squinted at her with sympathy that made Elena's cheeks burn. "Just need some sugar, dear. How are you managing?" "Just fine, thank you." Elena measured out the sugar with practiced efficiency, though her hands trembled slightly. She was not fine. She was drowning, and everyone in Fort Yuma seemed to know it. Mrs. Patterson paid her coins and paused at the door. "You know, my nephew is looking for a wife. He has a good farm up north." "You should not be alone, dear. A woman needs a man to take care of her." Elena's smile became fixed. "Thank you for your concern, but I am managing perfectly well." After the woman left, Elena's shoulders sagged. It was the third such suggestion this week. Half the town seemed determined to marry her off to some distant relative or widower, as if she were a problem that needed solving. She had loved Thomas, truly loved him, but theirs had been a quiet love, built on companionship and shared goals. He had been 15 years her senior, a kind man who had offered her stability when her own parents died. She missed him, missed his steady presence, but she also felt something she dared not speak aloud, a strange sense of possibility mixed with her grief and fear. The afternoon brought more customers, mostly buying on credit she could ill afford to extend. By the time the sun began its descent, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Elena felt exhausted to her bones. She was locking up when she heard it, the ominous creaking above her head, followed by a shower of dust and debris. She looked up in horror as a section of the roof sagged visibly inward. Another shingle fell, then another. If the roof caved in completely, she would lose everything. The store would be ruined, her inventory destroyed, and she would have nowhere to live. Elena sank down onto the front step, buried her face in her hands, and for the first time since Thomas's funeral, she allowed herself to cry. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, releasing months of pent-up fear and grief and desperate loneliness. She cried until she had no tears left, until the sky had darkened to indigo and stars began to appear. "Madam, are you all right?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly fell off the step. Elena looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the twilight, a man leading a horse, both covered in trail dust. She scrambled to her feet, hastily wiping her face. "I am fine. The store is closed." The man stepped closer, and in the fading light she could make out his features. He was young, perhaps close to her own age, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that held a gentleness unexpected in a stranger. He wore typical cowboy gear, dusty boots, worn denim pants, a faded shirt, and a hat he now removed respectfully. "I did not mean to disturb you, madam. I just rode into town and saw you sitting here. Wanted to make sure you were not hurt or in trouble." "I appreciate your concern, but as I said, I am fine." Elena tried to sound firm, but her voice betrayed her, cracking on the last word. The cowboy's eyes traveled upward to the damaged roof, then back to her face. "That roof does not look fine. It is none of your concern. Maybe not." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but not leaving. "But I am handy with repairs. Used to work with my father building barns back in Texas before I started working cattle. I could fix that for you." Elena stiffened. "I cannot pay you. Did not ask you to." He met her eyes steadily. "Just offering to help." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded she refuse. But as another piece of wood clattered down into the street, reality overrode pride. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." The cowboy shrugged. "Does not mean you do not need help. Name is Harrison Xavier, madam. I am just passing through, looking for work on one of the ranches nearby. I can start on your roof tomorrow if you want. No charge, just maybe a meal or two while I work." Elena studied him in the darkness, trying to gauge his intentions. She had learned to be wary of men offering help, as it often came with expectations attached. But something in Harrison Xavier's face, an openness and honesty, made her want to trust him. "Elena Jamison," she said finally. "This is my store. Well, it was my husband's store. He passed 3 months ago. I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Jamison. Why are you really doing this?" She needed to understand. Harrison was quiet for a moment, then said, "My mother died when I was 12. Left my father with 4 kids to raise and a farm falling apart. A neighbor, a widow herself, came by every day for a month to help us. Cooked meals, mended clothes, taught my father how to manage without her. She did not have to, but she said that is what neighbors do. They help each other. I have never forgotten that." Something in Elena's chest loosened slightly. "I suppose I could manage a meal or two. When can you start?" "First light tomorrow, if that suits you." "That would be acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Xavier." "Harrison is fine, madam." He smiled, and even in the darkness she could see the warmth in it. "I will see you in the morning." She watched him lead his horse down the street toward the boarding house, then went inside and locked the door. For the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny flutter of something that might have been hope. True to his word, Harrison appeared at dawn the next morning. Elena had been up for hours, unable to sleep, alternating between relief that help was coming and anxiety about allowing a stranger into her life. She had made coffee and biscuits, simple fare but the best she could manage with her dwindling supplies. "Morning, Mrs. Jamison." Harrison touched his hat brim in greeting. He had cleaned up since the previous night, his face freshly shaven, his shirt changed, though still worn and patched in places. "Good morning. I have coffee ready if you would like some before you start." "That would be much appreciated." They sat at the small table in the back room, an awkwardness between them that came from being strangers thrust into proximity. Elena poured coffee into chipped mugs and set out the biscuits, hyper-aware of how humble everything was. Harrison took a sip and sighed contentedly. "That is good coffee." "Thank you. You are welcome." She studied him over the rim of her own mug. In the morning light she could see him more clearly. He had a strong, honest face, weathered from outdoor work but still young. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who knew hard labor. "You said you were from Texas." "Yes, madam. Grew up near San Antonio. Worked my father's farm until about 2 years ago, then started hiring on with cattle drives. Been all over since then, Kansas, Colorado, now Arizona. You not miss having a permanent home?" Something flickered across his face, a shadow of sadness. "Sometimes. But after my father died last year, there was not much keeping me in one place. My older brother took over the farm and my sisters are both married. I figured I would see some of the country, save up some money, maybe find a place of my own someday. I am sorry about your father. Thank you. He was a good man." Harrison finished his coffee and stood. "I should get started on that roof. Do you have any lumber around, or should I go see about buying some?" Elena's cheeks flushed. "I have some in the shed out back. Thomas bought it months ago, intending to make repairs, but he got sick before he could." She paused, then added, "I cannot pay you, but I also cannot pay for new materials right now. The lumber you have will be fine. I will make it work." He smiled at her, and she felt her embarrassment ease slightly. For the rest of the morning, Elena worked in the store, serving the few customers who came in, while above her head she could hear Harrison moving around on the roof, the sounds of hammering and sawing oddly comforting. She found herself glancing up repeatedly, wondering about this stranger who had appeared in her life at precisely the moment she needed help most. Around noon, Harrison climbed down and appeared at the back door, his face flushed from the heat and exertion. "I need to get some water if that is all right, of course. Come in." Elena had prepared a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, more than she had planned, but unable to stop herself from wanting to offer him something substantial. "You should eat something too." Harrison's eyes widened at the sight of the food. "Mrs. Jamison, you did not have to go to all this trouble." "It is no trouble. You are working in this heat. You need to eat." They sat together again, and this time the awkwardness was less pronounced. Harrison ate with obvious appreciation, and Elena found herself relaxing in his presence. "How bad is the roof?" she asked. "Honestly, it is pretty bad. The wood underneath has water damage and several of the support beams are rotting. It is going to take longer than I thought to fix it properly." Elena's heart sank. How much longer? Maybe a week if I work full days. He must have seen her distress because he quickly added, "But I am happy to do it. I told you no charge." "A week is a long time. You said you were looking for ranch work." "You cannot afford to spend a week helping me for nothing." Harrison leaned back in his chair, considering. "Truth is, I am not in a hurry. I have enough money saved to get by for a while, and the ranches are not hiring much until the fall anyway. I would rather spend the time doing something useful than sitting around the boarding house. I feel like I am taking advantage of your kindness. You are not." His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Sometimes people just need help. There is no shame in that." She wanted to argue, but the relief was too overwhelming. "Thank you, Harrison. I mean it. Thank you." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Elena minded the store while Harrison worked on the roof, and as the day wore on, she found herself listening for the sounds of his labor, finding comfort in knowing she was not alone. When customers came in and asked about the hammering, she explained that she had hired someone to fix the roof, not mentioning that she was not paying him. Pride still stung, even as gratitude warmed her. As evening approached, Harrison climbed down one final time, stretching his back with a grimace. Elena had just finished sweeping the store floor and looked up as he entered. "I should call it a day," he said. "Made good progress, though. Replaced about a third of the damaged section." "You must be exhausted." "A bit," he smiled tiredly, "but it feels good to do honest work." Lena hesitated, then said, "I am making supper, nothing fancy, just stew. You are welcome to join me before you go back to the boarding house." Harrison's face lit up. "That sounds wonderful, thank you." As Elena prepared the meal in the small kitchen area, Harrison washed up at the pump outside. She found herself more nervous than she had been all day, suddenly aware that they would be sharing dinner, that this was beginning to feel less like payment for services and more like something else, something she was not ready to examine too closely. The stew was simple but hearty, made with vegetables and a bit of beef she had been saving. They ate in companionable silence at first, both hungry from the day's work. Then Harrison asked, "How long have you had the store?" "Thomas opened it 6 years ago when we first married. I was 18 then and he was 33. My parents had died the year before fever and I had nowhere to go. Thomas was kind. He offered me stability and purpose." She stirred her stew, remembering. "It was not a love match, not at first, but I cared for him. He was good to me." "That counts for a lot." "Yes." She looked up at Harrison. "What about you? Have you ever been married or close to it?" He shook his head. "No, madam, came close once back in Texas. Girl named Sarah, but her father did not think a farmer's son was good enough for his daughter. She married a banker instead." He said it without bitterness, just stating a fact. "After that, I have been moving around too much to get serious with anyone." "Do you get lonely?" The question surprised them both. Elena felt her cheeks heat, but Harrison just looked thoughtful. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I like the freedom of the open range, the movement, seeing new places. But there are nights when I am sitting by a campfire or lying in another boarding house bed, and I wonder what it would be like to have someone waiting for me, a home to go back to." Something in his words resonated deep within Elena. "I have a home, but it does not feel like one anymore. It just feels like a place I am trying desperately not to lose." Their eyes met across the table, and Elena felt a connection forming, fragile as spun glass but unmistakably real. She looked away first, unnerved by the intensity of what she had felt in that moment. "I should clean up," she said, standing abruptly. Harrison rose too. "Let me help. You have done enough for one day. I want to help." They washed the dishes together, working in a silence that had shifted from uncomfortable to charged with unspoken things. When the last plate was dried and put away, Harrison retrieved his hat from where he had hung it by the door. "Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Jamison. It was the best food I have had in months. Thank you for your work. I will see you tomorrow, First Light." He paused at the door, looking like he wanted to say something more, but instead just touched his hat brim and left. Elena closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. She barely knew this man. It had been one day. She was still in mourning for her husband. But something had sparked between them over dinner, something she had never felt with Thomas in all their years of marriage. She pushed away from the door and began preparing for bed, trying not to think about Harrison Xavier and the way his eyes had looked in the lamplight. But that night, for the first time since Thomas died, she dreamed of something other than fear and loss. She dreamed of gentle brown eyes and calloused hands and the sound of someone whistling while they worked above her head. The days fell into a rhythm. Harrison arrived each morning, shared coffee with Elena, and then climbed up to work on the roof. Elena tended the store, which seemed to get slightly busier as word spread that she had hired help. People were curious, and while some of the women gave her disapproving looks, most seemed relieved that she was managing. By the third day, Elena and Harrison had settled into an easy companionship. They talked during meals, sharing stories about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Elena learned that Harrison loved to read but rarely had access to books, so she lent him a precious volume of poetry that had belonged to her mother. Harrison taught her how to identify different bird calls and shared stories about life on the cattle trails that made her laugh until her sides hurt. She had not laughed like that in years. On the fourth day, A wealthy rancher named Mr. Colton came into the store. He was a large man in his 50s with a prosperous air and a calculating look in his eyes. Elena had never liked him much, but his money was good, and she could not afford to be choosy about customers. Mrs. Jamison. He removed his hat but did not bother with pleasantries. I heard you have fallen on hard times. Elena's spine stiffened. I am managing, Mr. Colton. What can I help you with today? I am not here to buy. I am here to make you an offer. He glanced around the store with obvious distaste. This place is falling apart. You cannot possibly keep it running on your own. I will buy it from you, fair price. You can use the money to move somewhere more suitable for a woman alone. The store is not for sale. Be reasonable, Mrs. Jamison. You are drowning in debt. I know Thomas owed money all over town. I am offering you a way out. I appreciate your concern, but I am not interested. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Is there anything else? Mr. Colton's expression hardened. You are being foolish. Pride will not keep a roof over your head. His eyes flickered upward at the sound of hammering. Speaking of which, I heard you hired some drifter to do repairs. Is that wise? A woman alone with a strange man around. The implication in his tone made Elena's blood boil. Harrison Xavier is a gentleman, and what I do with my property is none of your concern. Now, if you are not buying anything, I would appreciate it if you left. The rancher's face flushed with anger. He stepped closer, looming over her. You should watch your tongue, girl. You might find yourself in need of friends when that drifter takes off and leaves you worse than he found you. Is there a problem here? Both Elena and Mr. Colton turned to see Harrison standing in the doorway that led to the back room. He was not threatening exactly, but there was something in his stance, in the quiet authority of his voice, that made the larger man step back. No problem, Mr. Colton said stiffly. Just having a conversation with Mrs. Jamison. Looked like you were doing more than conversing. Harrison's voice remained calm, but his eyes were hard. The lady asked you to leave. For a moment, tension crackled in the air, then Mr. Colton forced a laugh. No offense meant. Just trying to help. He jammed his hat back on his head and strode out, but not before throwing Elena a look that promised this was not over. After he left, Elena released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Thank you. He makes me uncomfortable. Has he bothered you before? Not like that, but he has been circling like a vulture since Thomas died, trying to buy the store for less than it is worth. She rubbed her arms, suddenly cold despite the heat. Sometimes I wonder if I am being foolish. Maybe I should just sell and move on. Harrison crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Do you want to sell? No. This store is all I have left. It is my home, my livelihood, my independence. If I sell, I become dependent on someone else again. She looked up at him. Does that make me stubborn? It makes you brave. His voice was soft, and the look in his eyes made her heart skip. You are fighting for what is yours. There is nothing foolish about that. They stood there for a long moment, close enough that Elena could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that she could smell the soap he used, and the clean scent of sawdust that clung to his clothes. She felt drawn to him in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. Then the bell above the door chimed, and they sprang apart like guilty children as Mrs. Patterson entered, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. Good afternoon, Mrs. Jamison. Just need some coffee. She looked at Harrison with undisguised curiosity. And who might you be, young man? Harrison Xavier, madam. I am fixing Mrs. Jamison's roof. I see. The older woman's tone suggested she saw more than she was saying. Well, that is very kind of you. We have all been worried about Elena, all alone here. Elena served Mrs. Patterson with forced cheer, enduring the woman's thinly veiled questions about Harrison and his intentions. After she finally left, Elena and Harrison looked at each other and simultaneously burst into laughter. "I am sorry," Elena gasped between giggles. "She means well. They all do. But sometimes I feel like I live in a cage made of other people's concern." "Small towns are like that," Harrison grinned. "Everyone knows everyone's business, gets suffocating after a while." "Is that why you keep moving?" His smile faded slightly. "Partly. Also because I have not found a place that feels like it needs me yet. A place where I could belong." Before Elena could respond to that loaded statement, more customers arrived, and the moment passed. But his words stayed with her, echoing in her mind as the afternoon wore on. A place that needs me. Did Fort Yuma need Harrison Xavier? Or was it just her who needed him? That evening, as they shared another simple meal, Harrison seemed preoccupied. He picked at his food, his usual easy conversation replaced by long silences. "Is something wrong?" Elena finally asked. He looked up, startled. "No, I mean yes, I mean." He set down his fork with a sigh. "I have been thinking about what that rancher said today, about me being a drifter, about it not being proper for me to be around you so much. He is not wrong. People are going to talk." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Are you saying you want to leave?" "No," he said quickly. "That is the last thing I want, but I do not want to damage your reputation either. You have to live in this town after I move on." "After you move on," she repeated, the words tasting bitter. Of course he would move on. That was what he did. She had known that from the start. So why did the thought of it hurt so much? Harrison reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, covered her hand with his. The touch sent electricity through her. "Elena, I need to be honest with you about something," her heart hammered. "What?" "I came here planning to stay a few days, fix your roof, and move on like I always do. But something has changed." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, and she could barely breathe. "You have changed something in me. These past few days, working on your store, talking with you, sharing meals, it has felt more like home than anywhere I have been since my mother died. And that scares me because I do not know what to do with these feelings." "What feelings?" She barely whispered the words. "I think you know." His eyes locked onto hers. "I am falling for you, Elena. Maybe I already have fallen. I know it is too soon. I know you are still mourning your husband. I know I have no right to feel this way. But I do, and I needed you to know before this goes any further." Elena's mind raced. She should tell him to leave. It was too soon. Thomas had only been dead 3 months. What would people think? But her heart, her traitorous heart, was singing. Because the truth was, she had been falling for him too. Every shared smile, every gentle word, every moment of understanding between them had woven a thread that connected them. And now those threads had formed a rope that pulled her toward him with irresistible force. "I am falling for you too," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I have tried not to. I have told myself it is just gratitude or loneliness or anything other than what it really is. But you are right. Something has changed. When I am with you, I feel alive in a way I never did before. You make me laugh. You make me feel capable and strong and like I matter for who I am, not just for what I can provide. And that terrifies me because I barely know you and you are going to leave, and I cannot survive being abandoned again. What if I did not leave?" Harrison's grip on her hand tightened. "What if I stayed? There are ranches around here hiring. I could find work, settle down. I could court you properly if you would let me." "Court me?" Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Harrison, people will talk no matter what we do. If you stay, if we court, they will say I dishonored Thomas's memory. They will say I seduced you or that you are taking advantage of me. Mr. Colton will probably try to run you out of town. I do not care what they say. Do you?" She thought about it, really thought about it. Did she care? She had spent so much of her life caring what others thought, molding herself to fit their expectations. She had married Thomas partly because it was the practical thing to do, what people expected of her. She had run this store trying to live up to Thomas's standards, to be what the town needed her to be. When had she ever asked herself what she wanted? No, she said slowly, feeling the truth of it as she spoke. No, I do not care. I am tired of living for other people's approval. I am tired of being alone. I am tired of being afraid. She stood up, still holding his hand, pulling him up with her. But I need you to understand something. If you stay, if we do this, you cannot change your mind and leave in a month or a year when you get restless. I need to know you are committed, that this is not just some romantic notion that will fade when reality sets in. Harrison stood so close now that she had to tilt her head back to see his face. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch unbearably gentle. I have been running for 2 years, looking for something I could not name. I think I was looking for you for this, for a reason to stop running. His voice dropped to a whisper. I am not going anywhere, Elena, not unless you tell me to. Then stay, she breathed. Please stay. He kissed her then, softly at first, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Elena did not want to pull away. She leaned into the kiss, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, and let herself feel all the things she had been suppressing for days. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, two lonely people finding solace and passion in each other's arms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. I should probably go back to the boarding house. Probably, Elena agreed, but neither of them moved. People will definitely talk if I stay longer. They definitely will. I do not want to leave. I do not want you to. She pulled back just enough to look at him. But you are right. We should do this properly. We should court, let people get used to the idea of us together. Give ourselves time to be sure. Harrison nodded reluctantly. You are right. But Elena, I am already sure. I just want you to be sure too. I will be, she promised. Just give me time. He kissed her once more, a gentle press of lips that promised more to come, and then forced himself to step back. I will see you tomorrow, first light, she confirmed with a smile. After he left, Elena moved through her evening routine in a daze, touching her lips where he had kissed her, replaying every word of their conversation. She should feel guilty, she knew. Thomas had been a good husband, and his grave was barely settled. But she could not make herself feel guilty for something that felt so right, so true, so completely inevitable. The next morning, Harrison arrived with a bouquet of wildflowers he had clearly picked on his way over. Elena's heart melted at the sight of them, at the slightly embarrassed expression on his face as he held them out. I know they are just weeds, really, but I thought you might like them. They are beautiful. She took them, burying her face in the blossoms to hide her pleased smile. Thank you. The day proceeded much as the previous ones had, but with a new awareness between them, a charge in the air every time their eyes met. Harrison worked on the roof, which was nearly finished now, and Elena tended the store. But during breaks, they would sit together, hands clasped under the table where customers could not see, talking and simply being together. Word spread quickly through Fort Yuma that the widow Jamison and the cowboy fixing her roof were courting. The reactions varied from supportive to scandalized. Some customers stopped coming to the store altogether. Others, surprisingly, began shopping there more regularly, as if to show their support. Mrs. Patterson came in specifically to give Elena a lecture on propriety, which Elena endured with as much grace as she could muster. It has only been 3 months, dear, the old woman said, her voice dripping with disapproval. What will people think? They will think what they want to think regardless of what I do, Elena replied evenly. Harrison Xavier is a good man and I care for him. That is all that matters. But your reputation, my reputation will survive. And if it does not, then those who think poorly of me were never really my friends anyway." The older woman huffed and left without buying anything, but Elena found she did not care as much as she would have a week ago. Harrison was right. She was brave. She was fighting for what she wanted, and she would not apologize for it. On the 6th day, disaster struck. Elena was in the back room doing inventory when she heard angry voices in the store. She hurried out to find Mr. Colton and two of his ranch hands confronting Harrison, who had come in for a drink of water. "I told you to move along, Drifter," Mr. Colton was saying, his face red with anger. "But you did not listen. Now you are sniffing around Mrs. Jamison like a dog after a bone, thinking you can get your hands on her property." Harrison's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "My relationship with Mrs. Jamison is none of your business. Everything in this town is my business. I own half of it." Mr. Colton took a threatening step forward. "You are going to pack up your things and leave today, or me and my boys are going to help you leave." "Stop it." Elena rushed forward, putting herself between Harrison and the rancher. "Mr. Colton, you need to leave my store right now." "Not until this saddle bum is gone." "Then I will get the sheriff," Elena said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "You are threatening violence in my establishment. That is against the law." Mr. Colton laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The sheriff works for me, girl. You think he is going to side with you and this nobody over me? Maybe not." Harrison's voice was calm but hard as iron. "But I am willing to bet that even in a town you own, there are limits to what you can get away with. Attacking a man in broad daylight in front of witnesses crosses that line." The two ranch hands looked uncomfortable now, shuffling their feet. They were hired muscle, not criminals, and the situation was clearly getting out of hand. Mr. Colton sensed he was losing control. His hand moved toward the gun at his hip, and Elena's blood ran cold. But before anyone could move, the bell above the door chimed and the sheriff walked in, followed by several townspeople who had noticed the commotion. "What is going on here?" Sheriff Davies was a weathered man in his 60s who had known Thomas well. His eyes took in the scene with shrewd understanding. "Just having a conversation," Mr. Colton said, his hand moving away from his gun. "Nothing to concern yourself with, Sheriff. Did not look like nothing from where I was standing." The sheriff turned to Elena. "Mrs. Jamison, is this man bothering you?" Elena took a breath, aware that what she said next would have consequences. Mr. Colton was powerful, and making an enemy of him could ruin her, but she was done being afraid. "Yes, Sheriff. Mr. Colton came into my store and threatened Harrison Xavier, telling him to leave town. He implied violence if Harrison did not comply. He also intimidated me when I asked him to leave my property." The sheriff's expression darkened. "That true, Colton?" "I was just trying to protect the widow's interests. This drifter is taking advantage of her grief." "I am standing right here," Elena said sharply, "and I am perfectly capable of managing my own interests, thank you. Harrison has done nothing wrong. He fixed my roof, which was on the verge of collapse, and he is courting me with my full permission. That is all. Now I would appreciate it if everyone would leave my store except Harrison." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Sheriff Davies nodded. "You heard the lady. Colton, you and your boys clear out, and I better not hear about you bothering Mrs. Jamison or Mr. Xavier again, or we are going to have a real problem." Mr. Colton's face turned purple with rage, but he could not argue with the sheriff in front of half the town. He stormed out, his ranch hands trailing behind him, but the look he gave Elena and Harrison promised that this was far from over. After everyone had left and the store was finally empty again, Elena sagged against the counter, her legs shaking with reaction. Harrison was beside her instantly, his arms coming around her to hold her up. "That was incredibly brave," he murmured into her hair, "and incredibly foolish. You just made a powerful enemy." "He was already my enemy." Elena clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I am tired of being intimidated. This is my store, my life, and I will not let him bully me into selling or into giving you up." Harrison pulled back enough to look at her face, his eyes searching. "Are you sure about this? About us? Because Colton is not going to let this go. He is going to make trouble for you. Let him try." Elena lifted her chin defiantly. "I am not alone anymore, I have you." "Yes," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, you do, for as long as you want me. Forever might be nice." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a kiss that tasted of promises and hope and a future neither of them had dared imagine a week ago. When they broke apart, both were smiling despite the trouble they had just invited into their lives. "I should finish that roof," Harrison said reluctantly. "One more day and it will be done." "And then what?" Elena asked. "Will you go look for work at one of the ranches? Actually, I have been thinking about that." Harrison took her hands in his. "What if I did not work for a ranch? What if I worked here with you? I know the store is struggling, but between the two of us, we could build it back up. I am good with numbers, good with people. We could be partners, in business and in life." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "You would do that? Give up the open range to work in a store?" "I would give up anything to be with you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "The open range is lonely, Elena. I have had enough lonely to last a lifetime. I want to build something with you, a real home, a real life, if you will have me." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I will have you. Today, tomorrow, always." They stood in the store, holding each other as the Arizona sun streamed through the windows, and Elena felt something she had not felt in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. The future was uncertain. Mr. Colton would likely cause more problems. The town gossips would talk. Money would be tight for a while. But none of that mattered because she was not facing it alone. Harrison finished the roof the next day, and it was solid and watertight, able to withstand the harsh Arizona weather for years to come. That evening, he moved his meager belongings from the boarding house into the small room above the store that had once been Thomas's office. It was not quite proper, but Elena was past caring about propriety. They kept separate bedrooms to maintain some appearance of decency, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they married. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Harrison threw himself into learning the store business with the same dedication he had shown fixing the roof. He renegotiated with suppliers, convincing them that the store was now a viable business again. He reorganized the inventory and set up a new bookkeeping system that revealed exactly where they stood financially. It was worse than Elena had thought, but knowing the full scope of the problem somehow made it less frightening. Together, they worked from dawn until dusk, rebuilding what had been lost. Harrison's presence drew in new customers, men from the ranches who had never shopped at the store before but who liked Harrison and wanted to support him. Elena's cooking drew others. She began baking bread and pies to sell, and word spread that the general store now had the best baked goods in Fort Yuma. Slowly, painfully, the business began to recover. The debts Thomas had left began to shrink. The shelves filled with merchandise again. And through it all, Elena and Harrison grew closer, learning each other's rhythms, building a partnership that was based on mutual respect and genuine affection. 2 months after Harrison first arrived in Fort Yuma, he asked Elena to marry him properly. They were sitting on the front step of the store in the evening, watching the sun set over the desert, when he pulled a small box from his pocket. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring with a small ruby stone. "It is not much, but it is all I have to give you besides my heart." Elena looked at the ring with tears streaming down her face. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Harrison said with a smile, "but I promise to love you with everything I have for as long as I live." "Will you marry me, Elena Jamison? Will you be my wife and my partner and my home?" "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly as if it had been made for her. They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Elena thought that Thomas would have been happy for her. He had been a kind man who had wanted her to be cared for. He would not have begrudged her this second chance at love, a love that burned brighter and fiercer than anything she had known with him. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Fort Yuma. Mrs. Patterson attended, having softened somewhat now that a respectable amount of time had passed, and it was clear Harrison was not going anywhere. Sheriff Davies gave Elena away, standing in for the father she no longer had. And despite Mr. Colton's attempts to turn the town against them, a surprising number of people came to witness their vows. Elena wore a simple dress of pale blue that Harrison had insisted on buying her, the first new dress she had owned in years. Harrison wore his best shirt and pants, both carefully mended, and his eyes never left Elena's face throughout the entire ceremony. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with such tenderness and joy that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. And Elena, who had thought her life was over 3 months ago, realized it was only just beginning. Their wedding night was spent in the rooms above the store, and it was everything Elena had hoped for and more. Harrison was gentle and patient, making sure she felt cherished and desired. They made love with the passion of two people who had found each other against all odds, and afterward, lying in Harrison's arms, Elena felt truly happy for the first time in longer than she could remember. The months that followed were not without challenges. Mr. Colton continued to make trouble where he could, trying to interfere with their suppliers and spreading rumors about Harrison's past. But the community, seeing how hard Elena and Harrison worked and how devoted they were to each other, largely ignored the rancher's attempts at sabotage. The store continued to grow. Harrison's business acumen combined with Elena's warmth with customers proved to be a winning combination. They hired a young man to help with the heavy work, allowing them to expand their inventory and hours. Within a year, they had paid off all of Thomas's debts and were actually starting to save money. But more important than the business success was the life they built together. Their rooms above the store became a real home, filled with laughter and love. Harrison proved to be everything Elena could have wanted in a husband, supportive and affectionate, treating her as an equal partner in all things. And Elena, freed from the fear and grief that had weighed her down for so long, blossomed into a confident, joyful woman. They fell into comfortable routines. Mornings began with coffee together, planning the day ahead. During lulls in business, they would steal kisses in the back room like teenagers. Evenings were spent in their cozy sitting room, Elena doing mending while Harrison read aloud from whatever book they had managed to acquire. And nights were for passionate lovemaking and whispered conversations about their dreams for the future. 1 year after their wedding, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison over breakfast, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, pure joy, before he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing. "We are having a baby," he asked, setting her down gently as if she might break. Truly, truly, Elena confirmed, her own smile wide. Are you happy? Happy does not begin to cover it. Harrison pulled her close, one hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. I never thought I would have this. A wife, a home, a child. You have given me everything I ever wanted but never believed I could have. The pregnancy was not easy. The Arizona heat made Elena miserable during her last trimester, and there were complications that required bed rest for several weeks. But Harrison was unfailingly patient and supportive, taking over more of the store duties and caring for Elena with such devotion that she fell in love with him all over again. Their son was born on a cool November evening in 1879, arriving after a long and difficult labor that left Elena exhausted but exhilarated. Harrison held his son for the first time with trembling hands and tears streaming down his face, and Elena knew she had made the right choice in loving this man. They named him Thomas Harrison Xavier, honoring both the man who had given Elena stability when she needed it and the man who had given her love. Little Thomas had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he was the center of their universe. Parenthood changed them both in unexpected ways. Harrison became even more grounded, his wanderlust completely gone now that he had a family to care for. Elena discovered a fierce protective instinct she had not known she possessed. Together, they navigated the challenges of new parenthood with the same teamwork that had saved the store. The business continued to thrive. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, he became a fixture in the store, charming customers from his playpen behind the counter. The community, which had once looked at Elena and Harrison with skepticism, now regarded them with respect and affection. Even Mr. Colton eventually gave up his vendetta, though he never became friendly. When Thomas was 2, Elena became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter, Mary, was born on a spring morning in 1882. She had Harrison's brown eyes and Elena's blonde hair, and her father absolutely doted on her from the moment he first held her. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The store remained successful, providing well for their growing family. Harrison proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children about the world with the same gentle enthusiasm he had once used to teach Elena about bird calls. Elena balanced motherhood and business with grace, finding joy in both roles. The years passed in a blur of school pageants and family dinners, of long conversations on the front porch after the children were asleep, of stolen moments of passion that kept their marriage vibrant and alive. They added a second story to the building, giving them more room for their family while keeping the store below. Harrison built furniture in his spare time, crafting pieces that turned their home into a showcase of his skill. They faced challenges, as all families do. There were lean years when drought affected the ranches and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries and moments of fear. But through it all, they faced everything together, their love and partnership only growing stronger with time. When Elena was 32 and Harrison was 30, they welcomed a third child, another son they named William. By then, Thomas was 8 and Mary was 6, and both were excited to have a baby brother. The store practically ran itself now, with a small staff of employees that allowed Elena and Harrison to spend more time with their family. One evening, when William was 6 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Harrison and Elena sat on their front porch watching the sun set, just as they had done on the night he proposed. Thomas and Mary were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing through the warm air. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked, leaning against Harrison's shoulder. "Giving up the cowboy life for this?" Harrison laughed and kissed the top of her head. "Not for a single second," Elena, you gave me everything. Before I met you, I was just drifting, looking for something I could not name. You gave me purpose, a home, a family. You gave me roots. How could I ever regret that? I was so scared when you first offered to fix my roof, Elena admitted. I thought I would never be happy again, that my life was over. And then you came along and showed me I was wrong. You saved me, Harrison. No, Harrison said firmly, tilting her face up to look at him. We saved each other. You gave me a reason to stop running. I just helped you remember how strong you already were. We built this life together, Elena. Everything we have, we created side by side. She kissed him then, a kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their first kiss years ago. I love you, Harrison Xavier, more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Elena Xavier, always and forever. They sat together as the stars came out, watching their children play, secure in the knowledge that they had found what so many people spend their whole lives searching for: a true partner, a genuine love, a home not just in a place but in each other's hearts. Years continued to pass. The children grew and thrived. Thomas showed an aptitude for business and began helping in the store as soon as he was old enough. Mary turned out to have her mother's gift for baking and spent hours in the kitchen creating treats that became famous throughout Fort Yuma. William, the youngest, was a dreamer who loved books and stories, often found in some corner with his nose buried in a tale of adventure. When Elena turned 40 and Harrison was 38, they looked around at the life they had built and marveled at how far they had come. The struggling widow and the wandering cowboy had created something beautiful and lasting: a family, a successful business, a love that had only deepened with time. They never forgot how they had found each other. Every year on the anniversary of the day Harrison first came to fix Elena's roof, they would sit on the front step of the store and retell the story to their children. They would talk about the leaking roof, and the desperate widow, and the cowboy who had stopped to help. They would laugh about Mr. Colton's interference and Mrs. Patterson's disapproval. And they would hold hands, remembering those first fragile moments when they had recognized in each other something worth fighting for. The store remained a fixture in Fort Yuma, passing from Elena and Harrison to their son Thomas when he came of age, though his parents remained involved and active well into their later years. The building that had once been falling apart stood strong and proud, a testament to Harrison's skill and their determination. Fort Yuma itself changed and grew over the decades, but the general store remained a constant, a gathering place where people came not just for supplies but for conversation and community. Elena and Harrison became pillars of that community, respected and loved for their generosity and their devotion to each other and their family. On warm evenings, you could often find them on their front porch, now gray-haired and weathered by time but still holding hands, still looking at each other with love in their eyes. They would watch the desert sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors and count their blessings: 3 healthy children, 7 grandchildren, a successful business, and most importantly, each other. Harrison never regretted staying in Fort Yuma. The open range held no appeal compared to the life he had built with Elena. And Elena never regretted taking a chance on the cowboy who had appeared at her darkest hour. He had fixed more than her roof. He had fixed her broken heart and given her a future filled with love and joy. Their love story became something of a legend in Fort Yuma. Young couples would point to Elena and Harrison Xavier as an example of what true love looked like: a partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and genuine affection. They were proof that second chances existed, that love could bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the person you needed most appeared exactly when you needed them. As they grew older, they began to slow down, letting their children take over more of the daily operations of the store. But they never stopped working entirely, enjoying the routine and the connection to the community they had served for so many years. And they never stopped loving each other with the same intensity that had brought them together all those years ago. Harrison maintained his habit of bringing Elena wildflowers, picked on his morning walks through town. Elena still made his favorite meals, remembering exactly how he liked his coffee and his steak. They still stole kisses in the back room when they thought no one was looking, much to their children's amused embarrassment. And they still talked late into the night, sharing their thoughts and dreams just as they had when they were young. When Elena was 65 and Harrison was 63, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with their entire family gathered around them. Their children had all married and built good lives of their own. Their grandchildren, ranging from infants to teenagers, filled the house with noise and laughter. As Elena looked around at the family she and Harrison had created, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the cowboy who had stopped to fix her roof all those years ago. That night, lying in bed with Harrison's arms around her, she whispered, "Thank you for staying." Harrison, who had been half asleep, stirred and pulled her closer. "Thank you for letting me. Best decision I ever made stopping in Fort Yuma that day." "Do you think it was fate," Elena asked, "that you came along exactly when I needed you?" "I do not know if I believe in fate," Harrison said thoughtfully. "But I believe in love. I believe in choosing each other every day. And I believe that fixing your roof was the smartest thing I ever did because it led me to you." They fell asleep as they had almost every night for 35 years, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their home in each other's hearts. The years continued their steady march. Elena and Harrison eventually fully retired from the store, handing the reins over to Thomas and his wife completely. They spent their later years enjoying their grandchildren, tending a small garden behind the store, and simply being together. They took daily walks through Fort Yuma, greeting friends and neighbors, two familiar figures who had become part of the town's fabric. When they were in their 70s, both still healthy and active despite their age, they would sometimes talk about the past, marveling at the journey they had taken together. From that first desperate night when Elena had cried on the front step, to the moment Harrison had offered help, to their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, and every moment in between, it all felt like a miracle. "I was so broken when you met me," Elena said one evening as they rocked together on their porch, watching another Arizona sunset. "I thought my life was over." "You were not broken," Harrison corrected gently. "You were battered and scared, but never broken. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you were, and I needed you to give me a reason to stop running from myself. We were good for each other. The best." Harrison raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Elena Xavier." "And you are mine," she replied softly. "My cowboy, my hero, my home." They rocked in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts full, watching the sky turn from gold to crimson to purple. Their story, which had begun with a leaking roof and a desperate widow, had become a testament to the power of love, kindness, and second chances. They had built something beautiful together, not just a family or a business, but a life filled with meaning and connection and joy. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Harrison turned to Elena and saw in her face the same young widow he had fallen in love with decades ago. The years had marked them both, adding lines and gray hair and the aches of age, but the core of who they were remained unchanged. They were still partners, still lovers, still best friends who had chosen each other every single day since that first moment when their eyes had met in the twilight. "I love you," Harrison said, the words as true and vital as the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Elena replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Today, tomorrow, and always, just as I promised." They sat together as the night deepened, surrounded by the sounds of the desert and the distant laughter of their family inside. The store that had once been a burden was now a legacy. The roof that had been broken was now solid and strong, sheltering generations. And the two lonely people who had found each other against all odds had created something that would outlast them both, a love story for the ages. A reminder that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary lives. In the end, it had not mattered that Elena was a struggling widow or that Harrison was a drifting cowboy. What mattered was that they had recognized in each other what they needed most: a partner to face life's challenges with, a love to make the journey worthwhile, and a home not built of wood and nails but of shared dreams and unwavering commitment. The store in Fort Yuma would stand for many more years, passed down through generations of Xaviers, and every member of that family would know the story of how it all began. They would know about the grandmother who had been brave enough to accept help when she needed it, and the grandfather who had been wise enough to stop running when he found something worth staying for. They would know that true love exists, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the greatest adventures come not from wandering but from choosing to stay and build something lasting with the person who holds your heart. And on warm evenings in Fort Yuma, when the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, you could still feel the echo of that love in the walls of the old general store. A reminder that home is not always where you start, but where you choose to stay, and that the right person can turn a broken roof into a palace and a lonely heart into a home.